We're now for something completely different. We know Jamie Carragher in the Monday Night Football studio was picking his best central midfielders, the greatest central midfielders of the Premier League era. Asking you to do the same, Gary, and I want you to rank them. If you give us your 5 greatest Premier League central midfielders from 5th to number 1. Starting with your 5th best.
Well, there's a couple of things to start with. The list that I got sent through had the likes of David Silva on there and Kevin De Bruyne, and I would put, particularly Kevin De Bruyne, I mean, David Silva was wonderful. I'd put Kevin De Bruyne up there in some of the greatest Premier League players I've ever seen, but I wouldn't have him as a central midfield player. So I'm going to think more traditionally about players that I've seen as central midfield players that I believe have had the biggest impact and influence on the Premier League, who've played that position with dominance and with sort of skill and technical ability. So the 5th on my list, and I had a long list sent to me from our man this afternoon. In terms of influence and impact, the 5th player that I'm going to choose is Rodri. A Ballon d'Or winner, a treble winner, multiple Premier League title winner, Euros winner, won three League Cups, an FA Cup obviously, an outstanding player, plays that position wonderfully well, and he goes in. And look, I'm factoring in here influence, personality, skill, technical ability, what they've won,
and in the particular way that he plays, is he the best to have played it in the Premier League?
He's been the best in the world. I mean, that's why he won the Ballon d'Or. He's been the best in the world in his position up until that sort of knee injury, and obviously he's had an unfortunate sort of break from the game, and now he's come back and doing well. But he was the best in the world for 2, 3, 4 years, and miles ahead of anybody. When he first came to the Premier League, I actually wasn't convinced in that first season. He looked a little bit sort of like a bit heavy, a little bit not quite sort of mobile enough, and not really anything like special at all. And then all of a sudden, he just turned into a very special midfield player at the heart of a treble winning team, playing for Pep Guardiola and holding and knitting that team together. And there was a period where that sort of famous graphic wasn't the with and without Rodri graphic, because he never used to lose a football match. So I think just generally, I mean, he's been in the Premier League now how long? For 5 years. So, I think if Rodri had been in the Premier League maybe for 10, 12 years, that you'd be probably pushing him up into that sort of, you'd be challenging the players that I'm going to name in sort of 1, 2 and 3.
So what about 4?
Number 4 for me is Steven Gerrard.
Do you think Jamie put him at 4? Or?
I don't think so. But, I mean, look, there's reasons why I've put him at 4. I mean, look, to be in the top 5 in the central midfield. 1, because he didn't always play central midfield. Sometimes I feel that when he was at his best, the best Liverpool team that I played against, I feel, was when he was playing as a number 10. When he was sort of driving forward. He was playing, obviously, behind Mascherano and Alonso for a season or 2. Connecting with Torres, and I thought he was excellent there. I thought some of the most danger that he caused us in our time was when he sort of played off that right hand side. He played there for a season or 2 as well, and then towards the end under Brendan he went very deep and played sort of in that 4-3-3 where he wasn't a central midfield player in a 2, and I'm sort of thinking there that he played deeper in sort of that quarterback role. And I think, I can't remember who he had in front of him now, the 2 players. One was Jordan Henderson and the other, I can't remember. But so I'm thinking, Steven Gerrard, a monumental player, someone who I feel that if you were, again, a little bit like De Bruyne, I don't class, I mean, he was a central midfield player, more of a central midfield player than De Bruyne, and that's why I'm not categorising De Bruyne in this competition, because I don't think he's a central midfield player. I think he's more of a sort of what would be a right channel type player, and it's more of a modern position. And I think Steven, to be fair, at times played in different positions. So for me, I'm going to go Steven Gerrard, number 4.
Is it Coutinho you might have been thinking of?
Maybe. Played in that 3 in midfield with
Suarez and Sterling.
Yeah, it could be Coutinho and Henderson, and then
Lucas Leiva was around that period as well. Anyway, we're going off point. Number 3.
So number 3 is the person who I say was the best football player that I ever played with at Manchester United. But I'm talking about sort of generally measuring this from a point of view of impact in the Premier League, and aura and presence. So this player was the most beautiful football player, controlled every single game for us, and was the best player individually that I ever played with. But he also had periods in his career where he played off the front in a sort of 3, or he played as a number 10, and that's Paul Scholes. He was an incredible player, 11-time Premier League winner, 2 times Champions League winner, special player, someone who I think when he finally went back into central midfield and played there for 6, 7, 8 years at the end of his career was so special. And the reason I've dropped him down in this list behind sort of the 2 I'm going to name next is because he didn't play there all his career. He sort of played there for most of the back end of his career, and then he's formed a brilliant player. And he was just so special. He's different. Those players just don't come along. And he controlled football matches, and I've always tried to explain when we've had this argument in the past between who's the best. To control a football match is everything out there. Is everything. Not giving it away, switching play, making sure that you're stretching teams, making sure that you don't get counter-attacked on because you're not giving the ball away, making sure that when you're sort of trying to play out through lines, you've got a player who can sort of receive it and then jink around and put it around the corner, and just someone who basically made the game glued together. And you think about combinations and patterns in a football match. Paul Scholes enabled that for us. He enabled everything in that. So the likes of Giggs or Ronaldo or Bex or Wazza or whoever else it was, York, the reason they could do what they were doing was because they had this connection, this ability to have this sort of what would be mind reader of an intelligence that could connect the whole team together. So for me, yeah, he goes as number 3. Yeah.
And so that leads us to the top 2. I have a sneaky suspicion I know who are in the top 2, but what's your order?
The next player that I'm going to say is the most influential midfield player, the best midfield player in Premier League history, is Patrick Vieira. Just because of what he did for Arsenal, the presence, the spirit, the titles. Yeah.
Is there a modern player like him? I mean,
No.
they're not really like that type of. You don't see that type of player as much anymore, do we?
No, the top 2, I think, to be fair, are very different. They're mountains out on the football pitch. They're captains. They're leaders. They're great football players. They're the best defender in the team. They're the best attacker in the team. They're the people who stand up and say, give me the biggest guy on corners. They're the people who you feel safe when you've got in front of you. I'm sure the Arsenal team, when he was in that midfield, felt like he was a giant. And so for me, yeah, Patrick Vieira goes in at number 2 in terms of sort of what would be the all-time central midfield players, just purely because of his presence and his sort of, great tackler, great runner, quick, couldn't get the ball past him, couldn't take him on one-on-one, would get across to anything. Fantastic player.
So when you come up against a player like Patrick Vieira, you need somebody in your team, I would suggest, who can stand up to in that respect. Who's your number 1, Gary?
Ugarte. No, the number 1 is Roy Keane. I don't think there's ever been a more influential football player in the Premier League, full stop. In fact, I'm absolutely convinced there's not. I've never seen anybody drive a team forward with the standards that he had. An incredible attacking player. I've said it again, similar traits to Vieira, but I think a level up when it comes to sort of, he was a goal scorer. He's a good header of the ball in both boxes. He's a good tackler. He's a great runner and quick. Absolutely lightning quick, but with power. A good fullback, a good one-on-one defender, a good man marker in the box, someone who had the ability to compose himself in the final third, someone who could wrap passes through the lines into players like Dwight York or Eric Cantona or Paul Scholes or Wayne Rooney in the pockets in the number 10 positions, and that was really important in a different way than Paul Scholes would. Paul Scholes would do it in a very sort of different technical type, but Roy Keane would really just wrap those passes in, always look forward, and a great captain. So for me, he's the number 1 Premier League midfield player. And to be fair, I think if Jamie Carragher is selecting the number 1 central midfield player in Premier League history, you can't choose anybody else but Roy Keane, really, and I don't think many would.
And do you think Roy's underappreciated in a global sense? You think of the European stage and those nights against the great European players of that time. Because the longevity, you've spoken about that in regards to Rodri. I mean, Roy did it for a far longer period of time, and you think of Forrest as well.
Yeah, but maybe. Look, I don't know. I mean, obviously, I think that what we tend to do in this country, I think because Roy played for Republic of Ireland and he wouldn't have played in the same tournaments or had the ability to play. I know he did play in tournaments, but he wouldn't have had the same ability to play in World Cups and European Championships and go as far as maybe the England teams did. And, you know, if you think that we got to quarterfinals in 96, in 2004, in 2006, and when you're playing on that world stage or in that European Championship stage for your country, and particularly with the way in which we sort of what would be build players up in England, we build players up, English players up, there's no doubt. I mean, there's no doubt Roy Keane got a lot of praise during his career, but he wouldn't get the level of praise that an English player would, just purely because he wasn't playing for England. So I think that for me, maybe, they say that, don't they, about players like George Best. Never played in a big tournament. Mark Hughes, Ian Rush.
Ryan Giggs.
These great players who maybe, they've certainly influenced European football and Champions League football, and they've had great careers in Champions League football. But when you play in the World Cup and the European Championships, maybe there's that little bit more sort of what would be, magic dust sprinkled on you, and particularly if you're English. So I think there's an element of that, but let me be clear, Roy Keane is better than any single player that I ever played for with England in terms of central midfield player, and the only player that I put near him, and to be fair, he's very different, is Gazza. Gazza's absolutely unbelievable, but Gazza, a different type of central midfield player who again sort of did that. And there's some brilliant midfield players that I've not got in this top five. Incredible midfield players. I mean, Paul Ince was an unbelievable midfield player, and sort of find it hard to leave him out of the top five because of the influence that he had. And there are others. There are some great players. Xabi Alonso when he was at Liverpool, but he just wasn't there long enough. Frank Lampard. Again, I left Frank out because purely of the fact that if you said to me who's the sort of biggest goal-scoring influence from midfield, Frank Lampard comes into it. But he was very much of the, again, I know that some of them have played in a 3, but I was looking for more of players that have played in a 2, and I don't know why. Maybe that's just my thinking of it. The idea that sort of De Bruyne, Lampard, if you're talking to me about the biggest influence of sort of what will be attacking players who've played in this sort of area of the pitch, and David Silva, I'm going for a different type. I'm going for players who've played mainly in a 2. I know Rodri, he's playing in a 2 at the moment with Bernardo Silva for City, but he's sometimes played in a 3. But he's played always in central midfield. He's not been sort of over on the right. He's not been sort of in the pockets. He's always been in that sort of position. So I've just thought of it more traditionally in the 5 that I've selected. Gerrard makes it because he did play in there at times, but the reason he's not probably further up is because he did move around and flirt with the right side of midfield and number 10 and different positions. So, yeah, they're the ones I'm going for. I'm unequivocal and emphatic that it's Keane and Vieira when you talk about influence. Doesn't take away from the fact that the most talented player that I ever played with at United was Paul Scholes. But when you talk about sort of Premier League and sort of wider influence of Premier League storytelling and narrative, I think Keane and Vieira, you can't really move away from them. And I would always just have Roy Keane ahead of Patrick Vieira. That may be because I played with Roy, some would say, if you're an Arsenal fan. I don't think so. I just think he was just a little bit ahead of Patrick, but you're talking about, like, the best, and then a little, you're talking about up here, so you're talking about Ronaldo and Messi of central midfield in sort of Premier League history type stuff, you know what I mean? You're not talking about, there's no bad here. Everything's good if you're that quality.
And of your top 5, you'd have played with and against 4 of them, and
Yeah.
you've seen plenty of Rodri close at hand, so I think you're well placed to make these sort of judgments. Thank you, Gary.
Yeah, and I also am not as biased as Jamie Redknapp. Thanks for that. Sorry, Jamie Redknapp, Jamie Carragher, sorry. Sorry, Jamie Redknapp. Jamie Carragher. Sorry, I'll repeat that line. I'm not as biased as Jamie Carragher.